In a constant state of fear and misery, nobody understands me anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery, nobody understands. Live in a constant state of fear and misery, nobody understands me anymore.
Hello, everybody. Today is Sunday, September 23rd, and we're bringing you Block Digest number 127 at block height 542,715. Hello, hello, hello. What's going on?
What's going on is right. I'm like stretching all this stress out. I keep yawning, trying to take deep breaths because it just feels like everything's starting to pile on or something. It's like everything now. How you doing, Janine?
Pretty good. Just been watching some presentations and I've decided to write a new blog post, and part of that blog post will be discussed today.
Alrighty. Well, I guess first order of business is just a quick rundown of the CVE for Bitcoin Core that was recently fully disclosed. So the initial part of it that was immediately publicly released was just a simple denial of service. But if everybody remembers, in Bitcoin Core 0.15, another denial of service attack on the UTXO set was found. And it was that patch and slight change in UTXO handling behavior that actually introduced the inflation bug. And so pretty much it was the way that the software was structured to check for conflicting duplicate inputs in a transaction in tandem with this change to how validating things in the UTXO set that introduced this potential for inflating the coin supply by effectively having the same input twice in a transaction. And pretty much just a real quick gloss over of the timeline. This was, by all evidence, actually disclosed to Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin ABC, and Bitcoin Unlimited by Many, a Bitcoin Cash developer. And I know there has been some speculation going around based on the timestamps he provided that this isn't actually him who found this bug, but the service he used actually does have a once every 24 hours timestamping policy. And somebody that I know personally has verified that the hash of that message was put in the Bitcoin Unlimited Slack at the time he claimed. So by all information, this was actually found by him. And then from this point on, started reaching out to major businesses and mining pools to begin the process of updating. Shortly thereafter, an alert was sent to Bitcoin ABC that a patch will soon be publicly posted. At this point, the patch was published and an announcement about the denial of service attack was made. And I believe the next day, a Qtum developer, it is a shitcoin that is based off of the Bitcoin code, pulled in the patch and started tinkering around and found the inflation bug. And I made a very angry tweet at him on Twitter about this, but after calming down a little bit, he doesn't seem like a developer who has extensive experience in large projects like this or disclosure, and very quickly after tried to kind of cover up the bug with an excuse and blame it on his test environment and not the actual code. But at this point, the cat was already out of the bag. And I just want to say, please do not go harassing this individual. He attempted to cover his fuck up to prevent the consequences from rippling out, and has completely owned up to it. So I do not believe there was any kind of malicious intent here. But at this point, the cat was out of the bag, and the full nature of the bug was circulating around publicly. So at this point, Bitcoin Core decided to pretty much give a full disclosure of the inflation aspect. And it was about a day later, most miners and major businesses have updated. So at this point, network wide, it is ridiculously unlikely that any miner is going to exploit this, and any major business would not follow that chain at this point. But this is still a pretty bad bug, and everybody out there watching should update immediately if they have not already. This is something that, if in the very low likelihood that it is exploited, it would fork your node off of the network. So get out there and update. Full validation is important, and it's not the smartest idea to depend on miners simply enforcing a rule and ensuring the longest chain follows it. You should be doing so yourself. So I guess this is all out there. Stop lagging, upgrade your node. It's important.
The most part, like a good part of the network's upgraded, though, right? Is there any stat on that yet? Like, I've heard over 50% for sure, but do we know anything else other than that?
I haven't been tracking the stats too closely. Like I said, miners and major businesses have upgraded, so network wide, it's not a very urgent threat, in my opinion, but you should still upgrade because, like I said, not enforcing things locally is introducing a risk, no matter the size of that risk.
Updating, pretty quick on, because sometimes you could tell some of these updates, there's something behind them where, because it's a big, everybody should update, and the proper disclosures going on there. And it's a really important process. And, it's kind of crappy to see people just sort of step on that. And, it's a lot of other coins out there that are taking code from Bitcoin that still have these vulnerabilities that aren't really, up to speed on updating their network. So it's, it's something where, I'm glad that most of, like you're saying, most of the major businesses and everything have upgraded to where the whole idea, the threat of double spend or inflation is out of there. And it's just, even once I looked in, pretty difficult. It was like, everybody, the Bitcoin network is super secure. It's like this idea of this thing actually being used, in a way that maliciously, just like somebody actually trying to double spin on the network, it seemed like it was still, very troublesome to try and do. So, it's good to see that everybody reacts quickly to something that, it's a vulnerability, but it would be very technical people that would know how to take advantage of that, and a lot of weight behind it. And so it's good to see it, everybody updating. And, I think it's a little lesson you take from it is like, something affects network security, everybody's forking off. Everybody's pretty quick to find consensus on that.
I mean, ultimately, like, this would have, after the denial of service patch, led to attempts to reach out to all of the derivative projects out there who pretty much forked off of the Bitcoin code base and were vulnerable to this, but that is an extensive list to go through and to find means of communication with. And I mean, ultimately, once the inflation aspect of the bug was publicly released, like, it is what it is. Like, it has to be fully disclosed. People have to be given the actual reason to update because it's circulating now, and people know what can actually be accomplished by exploiting it. So I mean, it's like, in normal circumstances, when that had not happened, this would have led to a much more delayed disclosure of the inflation aspect and an attempt to find every project and team that is vulnerable to this and give them a heads up to update before it was fully disclosed. But I mean, once the cat was out of the bag, I mean, it sucks, but it is what it is, and it had to be disclosed so people knew how important it was to update. And I mean, yes, that's creating a situation where other projects out there could potentially be exploited, but again, like I don't think there was any malicious intent whatsoever, but the Qtum developer putting that out there kind of forced their hand and limited the options available. And I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, it's open source development. Every error is very public.
Mm-hmm. But I guess that's covered. Everybody, I'm shaking my fist at you. Get your fucking node updated if it's not updated already. But
Do it.
I think we should slide along into the first story. So 2 days ago, Bitmain put up a blog post after making an announcement at the World Digital Mining Summit in Georgia that they're releasing 7 nanometer chips soon. And we're bragging about 42 joules per terahash as the efficiency. And wow, look, hey, after we fucked up our entire IPO, after we committed fraud, lying to all of the people we were trying to gather money from, after it came out that more than 50% of our company's assets are just unliquidatable in Bcash and obsolete hardware. Look, guys, we finally have a new chip. Ignore the fact that only 5% of our company's assets is liquid cash that can actually be put into anything. We're doing great now, guys. And yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people saw this and were immediately thinking, fuck, Bitmain is going to chug along, like they're going to bounce back from this. But I don't think that's how this is going to go at all. Samson Mao put out a tweet shortly after this, and I will remind everybody that before his time at Blockstream, he was the chief operating officer at BTC or BTCC, and actually managed the exchange and mining business units. So he has a lot of experience in dealing with the mining aspect of the ecosystem. And so first off, the soon, how soon? Like that's going to take time to tape things out, get a production run, assemble miners, to test the actual equipment, because right now they've only actually tested the chips. And, how long is that going to take? And so the second thing he points out is this phrase that there's over 1 billion transistors in the chip. That's just vague PR speak and doesn't really mean anything, because the amount of transistors you can pack into a chip of differing nanometer sizes, like you can do that with other sizes. It's just, as Samson put it, it's like saying the car will have 4 wheels. And then the really interesting part is the announcement of the electrical efficiency was pretty much just lab testing, which is very highly controlled conditions using only the chip itself and not an actually assembled miner. So the 42 joules per terahash is pretty much the most efficient it can get in highly controlled conditions, looking only at the efficiency of the chip itself and not just the completed miner. And looking at historical figures, the S9 was advertised as 75 joules a terahash in these same kind of lab tests before the product actually launched. But the miner itself, after it was released, actually operated at 98 joules a terahash. So you're talking close to 30% more power consumption when you actually take the chips out of the lab and get that running. And also the fact that this is a 7 nanometer tape out. So this is the cutting edge of semiconductor fabrication technology so far. Well, WhatsMiner, the company or the product being launched by Byteway, which was started by the actual engineer who developed the S9 for Bitmain, is a 16 nanometer chip. that is showing actual demo stats with the whole unit at 64 joules per terahash. So you're talking, looking at the lab figures and the margin for error that this new Bitmain 7 nanometer chip might wind up with in an actual product, you're looking at something pretty much on par in terms of energy consumption from a 16 nanometer chip from their former lead engineer. So, yeah, that's not really looking too good. This isn't really the holy shit Bitmain rises from the grave news story that they're trying to spin it as. Last generation chips are pretty much at the point of efficiency that Bitmain 7 nanometer chips are. We've also had Ebang recently announce a 10 nanometer chip with an at the wall whole unit test of 45 joules per terahash. So again, less advanced fabrication technology. This is not just on par with what the probable efficiency of the whole Bitmain unit will be. This is on par with their lab test efficiency for the entire unit at the wall. So we have Byteway with more efficient hardware. Ebang is launching more efficient hardware. The Dragon Mint was more efficient than the S9 when it was first launched. We have GMO that has a more efficient 7 nanometer equipment, which is probably going to be continued in the refining process. We have the Anteater, which was designed by the company invested in by DPW Holdings, which is actually setting up that hydro dam in New York to run their own equipment. And God knows who else is going to start over the next year or two developing their own equipment simply for mining purposes instead of selling on the consumer market, which is another thing aside from just pure market competition in the consumer markets that's going to start eating into demand for, products from companies like Bitmain. Like this isn't really that whoop. Bitmain is going to bounce back and beat the shit out of all the competition news that they're trying to spin it as. This is pretty much more deceptive PR in the wake of them getting called out for all of the deceptive information in their IPO documents and pretty much attempting to defraud everybody they were trying to get invested in their company. So keep up the popcorn, Bitmain, because I enjoy laughing my ass off.
That was a funny quote there from Samson. It's like saying a car has four wheels. Like, I mean, yeah, it is kind of sounds like something where you're just trying to say, like, we're important, we're relevant, like, we're still here, we're still doing things, and don't, it's like information that people have been digging up. But it does, like, I mean, like, the whole miner thing, I mean, everybody's skeptical till shipment, right? Like, even when the How Long Mining came out with that video showing the miner and showing behind what it was doing on the network, there was a lot of people that was like, yeah, what about, we can't really see this, or how do you know that's really the real statistics? It's not just some graphic overlay. And it's reason to be skeptical, but I mean, like, skeptical, super skeptical. And that was with some video evidence, where here it's just like you're saying, it's a lot of PR speak and everything. And especially like in right now, the hash rate has been going through the roof, and there's a discussion about new miners coming out and stuff, but they're not really pumping their information. I mean, like, they put out their press releases saying, like, yeah, we're developing this new miner and it's supposed to do this and that. They're not going out there saying, and there's transistors on this chip. I mean, it does sound kind of like some desperation over there, but I think we can understand why they're trying to control the narrative about their company.
Mm-hmm. And just a little last note for me at least is I'll add this to the description after we get off air, but Fundstrat has released an analysis of mining equipment efficiency, and I'm not exactly sure what electrical prices these are projected at. I'll have to dig in a little more to figure that out, but whatever market rate they're using for electricity in this, the new What's miner from Byteway is pretty much the only profitable miner at this point at the price at the time it was published, which was around 6,300. So this is we're getting to that point where the price is around the range of operational costs for miners, including their production costs to make a Bitcoin as well as pay off equipment. And if we don't bounce up really quickly, like these losses for Bitmain are going to start really stacking up very fast.
Yeah, I know some people here in town that are, mining and, trying to cover all the costs and everything. But it's, it's that long-term vision and understanding and everything where at least we're all on this network where we know we're going to be somewhere in the future with all this. And I know Truth Monster don't want to hear it, but Bcash and all this stuff going on with Bitmain is sounding, oh man, it's sounding flimsy, man. The scaffolding is not looking strong.
Yep. But I don't know, in the interest of time, because there's probably a few different stories that are going to spark off actual discussion today. You want to take us into the next one, Janine?
Yeah, mine is going to be one of those that is quite long. The discussion might be long, but my part in itself is long because, as many of you may have seen if you watched the last episode of Block Digest, it was announced several hours before that show that Cody Wilson was being charged with, quote, sexual assault of a minor. And most of the discussion we had in that episode was more speculative because at the time it was breaking news and there was a lot of gaps in the story, and they were still looking for him and figuring out where he was. Well, in that time since the last show, I've been doing more investigation, and I'm going to give more of a full update, or at least as full as I can, and you can follow along because there's a lot of links that I'm going to be quoting from, and some of them might be better to have visual aids since we won't have them on the screen. The first and second links that I have are that while we were doing the last show on the 19th, a journalist from Ars Technica, which I don't like in general, but in this particular journalist I generally trust, he was able to obtain a full 5-page affidavit, which was filed by Detective Sean Donovan, who has a position in the human trafficking unit of the Austin Police Department, where his duties include, quote, investigations involving child pornography, online solicitation of minors, child sexual assault, and exploitation. And he writes that, quote, a juvenile female under the age of 17 told a counselor, I'm assuming at a school, most likely, that, quote, she had sex with a 30-year-old male on August 15th, 2018 and was paid $500, end quote. And she said that they met on SugarDaddyMeet.com. We'll get into that later. And I'm not going to read the whole affidavit. Obviously, it's public, so you can read it. But there are a few details that I want to kind of point out. The first one is that they're calling her a juvenile female, and then they start calling her the victim. She, in her statement that she made, said that she created the profile on the website herself. And this detail was confirmed by the commander of the Austin Police Department in a press conference that they gave immediately after it was announced that they were looking for him, where he said that they have no reason to believe that anyone other than the victim signed up for the website. I'll get into the problems with that later and how that probably led to a lot of this controversy. Another point, there's no mention of violence, any specific violence or coercion of any kind in the summary of the incident. So I find it strange that they're describing this as a case of sexual assault, because when there's no violence or coercion involved outside of the sexual activity itself, and the only factor that makes it illegal was either the solicitation aspect or the fact that she was underage, then the legally accurate criminal classification would be statutory rape. So using the term sexual assault is not really accurate here, because sexual assault specifically relates to a person like violating someone who has the ability to give consent. And when there is actual violence and coercion involved, if the minor is participating ostensibly voluntarily, even if apparently we don't believe in the idea of a 16-year-old being able to consent to this kind of stuff, that's a separate classification and it's called statutory rape. So I think we should be accurate. And then according to the officer's evaluation of the surveillance footage, they were in the Archer hotel room where this supposedly occurred between 8:37 and 9:19 p.m. So it was less than 45 minutes. And they, according to the thing, they engaged in both penetrative and oral sex. And the press conference with the commander of the APD actually provided more details, which were not in the document, including that the age of this juvenile female was 16 years old, so just under the age of legal consent in Texas. So some people were reporting that she was 13 years of age. That's all completely wrong. Unless this commander just got it completely wrong. The stance of the Austin Police Department is that she's 16, and that's who they interviewed. Again, a whole bunch of theories about who she could actually be, because we have no idea of verifying that, because special rules about children, which are, I think, justifiable, but still not verifiable. The third link that I have on September 20th, the U.S. Marshals Service issued a press release that there was a warrant for his arrest and that they were trying to determine his last known location. The fourth and fifth links that I have listed are about what the Taiwanese authorities were doing when they were trying to locate him. On the same day that the U.S. Marshal Service issued a press release, it was determined that Cody Wilson's last known location was the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Taipei, Taiwan, between the 6th and 7th of September, and he had missed a return flight to the United States, supposedly because he had been tipped off, but they don't know who did that. On September 21st, it was reported that the police had arrested him in Taipei, despite the authorities kind of confusingly saying that they were not able to arrest him because the age of consent in Taiwan is 16 years old, and therefore under their law, it would not be considered criminal. And for most countries, if a person, whether or not they commit the act in that country, if it's not a criminal offense in that country, sometimes they don't help out other countries as much when they're trying to get individuals extradited. For example, I think Switzerland, a lot of the financial crimes that may justify an extradition in a lot of other places don't really work out that well because Switzerland doesn't have them, because it's considered civil, not criminal. And so Cody would have had a really hard time apparently attempting to leave the country, because even though they weren't really supposed to arrest him or not really sure, the American embassy in Taiwan had already moved to cancel his passport, and so if he had gone to an airport, he would have just been deported back to the United States. The sixth link is a statement from the the Free State Project, because I'm aware of at least two events where he was scheduled to speak in the next several weeks, and one of them is the Free State Project. The other one is Parallel Polis. And the Free State Project tweeted a statement on September 22nd, which was yesterday, that he was, quote, no longer listed as a speaker for the New Hampshire Liberty Forum because the recent legal proceedings make it unclear he will be able to attend. Mr. Wilson was invited to speak about the intersection of the First and Second Amendment and is still welcome to do so. So quite interesting that they said that. Parallel Polis has not released a statement about what they're going to do, but his picture is still currently on their website. I don't know if they maybe haven't heard about the news or they just haven't made a decision because they're dealing with a lot of their own issues at the moment. Now to get to a part that is slightly more enraging, which is where this all started, which was SugarDaddyMeet.com. I actually went to check it out, and it was just as Jimmy triggering as I was expecting it to be. In order to set up an account, you have to say whether you are a sugar daddy looking, and I don't know, maybe for the English or the non-English speakers, just to explain briefly, a sugar daddy is basically a rich guy who would be willing to lavish gifts and money and financial support onto the whole point of the definition is a younger woman who is willing to basically trade sex in exchange for money and a lavish lifestyle, or whatever that means. So yeah, you may be wondering, not too different from prostitution. It's basically like a how shall we say it? It's a nicer word for prostitution, because that's basically what it is. Prostitution is trading sex for money. If that's the foundation of the relationship, That's what it is. I'm sorry. I know you don't. They don't want to classify it that way, which we'll get into later. But in case you didn't notice, if you look at the website, being male is basically synonymous with having money. There's no option to be a sugar mama. Although to be fair, the ratio of sugar mamas to sugar daddies is basically like there's none. There aren't that many. If you look at the statistics for the ratio of sugar daddies to sugar babies on this website, it actually says point blank that it's like 1 in 4. I believe it was, I don't have the website open, but I think it was like 1.3 million sugar babies and 300,000 sugar daddies, which means there's only one man for every 4 women on this website. That's a bit awkward considering they claim that these people are looking for long-term relationships. And another thing you have to do when you go on the website is you have to provide what state and country you're living in, as well as the age range for the person that you are seeking. Notice that it does not let you select for anyone younger than 18 years old. Why? Because if you look at their terms of service agreement, it clearly states that you must be at least 18 years old, 18 years of age to register as a member or to use the website. And if they find you violating that policy, they reserve the right to close your account immediately. However, if you scroll down to points 15.5 through 16.2 in their terms of service agreement, you are also agreeing, or at least acknowledging, that SugarDaddyMeet.com does not conduct background checks on any of its users and is not responsible for, quote, any of the information provided during such as I don't know, they kind of messed up the grammar there, but they do not they're not responsible for the age, education, photo, occupation, income, or any other verification process. In issuing any certification as to a member's verified or certified status, you agree and accept that SugarDaddyMeet.com has not done any due diligence on the materials or information provided, but has simply relied on the information submitted by the member or user, which may or may not be accurate or truthful. The term verified or certified is not to be in any way construed as a guarantee of any information provided by the member to you or by the member as being correct. So TLDR, the verified tag is bullshit. Surprise. What's really awful, though, is that if you go to the FAQ section of their website, one of the questions, obviously, is what does verify mean, or verified? The answer they give you is the following. It means proving your identity by uploading a readable and clear copy of your photo ID from a driver's license, state ID, or passport, and or other related material. By verifying your information, you are showing members you are real and serious about finding a match or friends. We do not disclose, sell, or rent any personal information to any third-party organizations. All information provided is kept confidential. In their privacy policy, they also state that they do not, quote, knowingly collect personal information from children under the age of 18. They require that all members affirm that they're at least 18 years old. So for anyone who doesn't know, in legalese terms, knowingly means we probably are doing this, but we don't actually verify whether we're doing this properly, but we have to say that we don't, or at least we have to pretend that we don't, because then we'd get in trouble, especially for something like this. Of course, what kind of service would they be if they didn't at least offer a section in their forum where they can give advice on how you can perform your own due diligence? So yeah, they have that, but verified tag means nothing. And in their forum, they also have a post about how sugar babies and prostitutes aren't the same thing. Again, this is just more legalese and marketing shit from my standpoint, that their website, it helps them not get shut down by the government, basically. And they even have a line about sugar babies are mostly, quote, independent women who don't need to sell their bodies, and prostitutes face maltreatment, emotional and physical abuse, whereas sugar babies have a lifestyle of comfort and lavishness. Well, actually, the statistics on the kind of girls and women who actually become sugar babies show that they're mostly young students trying to survive after digging themselves into financial debt, as well as single mothers who also have their own financial debt because it's hard to take care of children as well as supporting yourself at the same time. And their description of sugar babies is kind of contradictory on the website itself, because on the main page, their website literally states that sugar babies may be struggling in the early part of your career. I've also take this opportunity, because this case comes up of Texas, to point out that Texas is one of the states which mainly uses abstinence-only sex education. It's a wonderful thing in the U.S. that maybe a lot of people outside of the U.S., like Europe, think that maybe has gone away, but it hasn't. And abstinence-only sex education is correlated with higher rates of teen pregnancy and sexual disease transmission. And indeed, Texas has one of the highest teen birth rates in the United States. It's usually in the top 3 or 5 states. I think it's 75 out of somewhere around is like 70 to 75 out of every 1,000. So we're basically dealing with a 16-year-old girl who allegedly not only signed up to a website that has explicitly shown itself to be about seeking relationships where sex is exchanged for money, but also she was able to get a fake ID in order to bypass the admittedly shitty verification system on this website. On the other hand, we have Cody, who for all intents and purposes probably did not read the terms of service. Most people don't, and was probably gullible enough to believe that the verified tag actually meant something, and assumed that anyone he met through this website would be at least 18 years of age. He might have even asked her for the ID when they met in person. Can't tell because we don't see the surveillance footage, and they didn't point that out. But if she did have a fake one, he wouldn't have known she was underage as long as it matched her profile information. And to be fair, even if she had shown him a fake ID, it wouldn't have mattered because her decisions are irrelevant in all of this. Nothing she does matters. She could have done anything, and he is the one who legally is responsible for everything that happens here. So yeah. It's all on him regardless. And like I said in the last episode, determining at what age any person has the ability to consent to this kind of activity is a very gray area. But you know what? I was once a 16-year-old girl, and believe it or not, maybe I can offer some perspective on what it was like to be a 16-year-old. And first of all, people should understand that until you reach the age of 18 in the United States, you are even more of a slave to the state than any adult person around you, and you are extremely limited in the choices you can make. None of them are ever truly yours. You can't even own real property. Your stuff is basically owned by your parents as a proxy, and you're allowed to drive a car from the age of 13 or 14, something like that, might vary by state, which is basically operating a very large and explosive prone machine that could easily kill you and a lot of people. But you're not allowed to have adult relationships, even if they're very close in age to you, even if it's like literally the next day. Your parents and sometimes even teachers are allowed to physically assault you from basically the moment you're born. This is called discipline, just as long as they don't assault you too hard, and as long as it's not of a sexual nature, presumably. We don't ever really know that. And there was something I was very aware of by the time that I was 14 or 15. Even if I had wanted to engage in that kind of activity with someone, it would basically mean putting them in danger from the state. I was aware of this, especially if they fell into this special category of over 18-year-olds where, you go to sleep one day and you're a child, you wake up the next day and, oh my God, you're an adult and you have a full understanding of, your capabilities as a person, and how to, manage relationships. You all know that like instantly overnight. Somehow it happens. We never get evaluated on that kind of thing. There's never like an exam like, are you a mature adult? No, of course not. Because if we actually took that, we'd find that most adults are about as immature as a lot of very young children in terms of their ability to have healthy relationships. And so I realized very early on that if I did truly care about someone, there was no way that I was going to risk their safety. And so I didn't. And the horrible part wasn't that I was somehow missing out on fun or whatever. It was rather the realization that my body did not belong to me and that my desires did not matter. No matter how much I proved myself to be a mature or responsible person, nobody would give a shit because the law is the arbiter on whether you're considered a person. And it can always, no matter if you're 18 or whatever age, it can always make you an unperson whenever it wants to. So the question I have for anyone, especially those in positions of authority who have decided to condemn someone on the basis that a basically almost adult who is less than 1 year away from being able to fully consent to this meeting with this guy, who lied about her identity and in all appearances was not attacked or coerced into this decision. At least that was not mentioned in the statement. Are you really comfortable with putting a guy in prison for a decade or more for that when you could easily put those resources toward finding actually dangerous people who deliberately target children on a daily basis? Much younger children? And I want to highlight a statement that should illustrate how absurd this is from the commander of the APD during the press conference. He literally said, quote, "Anytime you solicit, whether a child or an adult, it's illegal. This happens to be a child, but I don't think my detectives have ever sat down with an alleged perpetrator that said, I knew the victim was underage. What does that tell you?" That was end quote, by the way. So what does this tell you? It tells you that this case would have happened regardless of her age. This quote is like really important and more people should pay attention to it because this clearly points out that this is all about the solicitation aspect. It's about them judging this whole sugar daddy, sugar baby encounter like this to be prostitution and criminalizing it as such. They don't give a shit about protecting children. At least none of their statements have supported that. He said this happens to be a child as if it's, it's a side effect. It's like an extra factor. But he says the point is about the solicitation. So she could have been 20 years old. She could have been 40. It wouldn't have mattered to them. They could have prosecuted anyone who engaged in this kind of meeting from that website, but they chose Cody. And so people should ask why. And they should ask what the intent of this case really is about, because I do not see it as being about protecting children. That was a very long rant.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not about protecting children. And, geez, yeah, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, like, God, it's just the dating world is so crazy right now. And my goodness, like this whole, like you were saying about like the press conference, I'll just start from there because that's where you just left off. Like the definition of solicitation. I mean, like you could go crazy with that. Lawyers like to dig into this sort of stuff. And I mean, how many times is it like every relationship starts off with a date? And I don't know, I come from the South where it's like the man pays and, that's just what happens. And, it's just, it's like, it's so open for interpretation. I just feel like it feels like this is just, the establishment pushing their thumb down as hard as they can on this situation, which honestly, like the way that Cody got wrapped up into this, it's upsetting because, you'd hope that some of these guys that are, running the charge on some pretty important legislation would understand that, they could easily be targeted by some groups to put them in a situation where they could be blackmailed. And that seems to be one of the major aspects of a lot of these prostitution rings, which, I mean, like, let's just get rid of, SugarDaddyMeet is in Australia, 3 locations in Australia, in China, the UK, and the US. And, there's a lot of some legal prostitution and illegal prostitution, but it seems like all these websites are like regulatory capture of prostitution, right? Where it's like, we're going to control this market and we'll be damned if, we're going to let a woman decide whether or not she wants to do this or that. And it's just, golly, it's just a terrible situation with all the dating and the websites and if you're in some position of power, then you really have to watch out for somebody trying to, maybe they know you like women, and they just try to put you in there. And it's like, the verification of the age thing, it's so stupid. I mean, it's like you think you're in this system where everybody's 18, but, I think we have some screenshots down there in the show notes and from the web archive of just like, there's no real verification going there about age. I went through it last night. The website's like, you just type in your age. There's nothing there about you should do this or you should do that. There was a section in the back of the site about you should do your own due diligence about all this stuff. Like, they're not going to do the due diligence. Like, it's all up to you because this is like a trap. I mean, it's something where it makes them probably the biggest amount of money made is whenever they capture a person like this in their spider web and they're able to roll them up real quick. And now you've got, major government officials who are like, hey, we want that evidence because, this could really help us pin this guy down. And it's it's a really disturbing story because there's a lot of stuff going on with these like different websites that are pushing this level of, you know, prostitution in rich areas or where NFL games are, or, you know, just it's something that can't be denied. I mean, like you could sit there and start your website and say like, you know, you're X, Y, and Z and just for that, but there's just nobody holding these people accountable because it serves their purpose of trying to, you know, put their thumb down on people that they don't like or that they want to control. And it's just a sad thing that goes on in government right now. And, you know, it's upsetting that Cody didn't kind of have the foresight on all this, because after the last episode and looking into this a little bit, it does look like he met with this girl and all that, but really suspicious as to like, why was she counseled to go speak to the police and who was the counselor? That wasn't really mentioned in that press conference. Like he didn't want to say if it was a high school counselor or a counselor from some company or something. You know, I think they could have reached out to him before he even left for Taiwan, but it's like they didn't. And, you know, they let him go over there. And it's just like all the headlines have kind of been like really bad. It's like he missed his apartment key pickup, still in the country, and they arrest him later. Like I saw something in there where they were on one of the initial press releases where they tried to make the age difference seem even greater, where they said Cody was 33 and she was, you know, just under. They wouldn't even say her age. Just like they were real hesitant to say she was 16. Like that reporter had to be like, was she over 13? Yeah, she was over 13. But she was under 17. So like there's only you know, a couple of ages there. And so they finally said 16. It's just a lot of weird information. The way it's coming out, it just feels more like this is all about just trying to put Cody in a place where he can't fight this fight. And it's, yeah, I think that's the most we should all probably take away. Like, you know, if you're on one of these dating sites or something, just get out of there.
I think like after looking at everything like Janine's dug up, it's like I think they were just watching him, found him with something to nail him in this, and then digging further found out that she was underage and decided to delay things, drum it up, like tried to paint this as if he was actually fleeing the country. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if the entire way that this school counselor found out was some kind of anonymous tip or something that led to her interrogating this girl over this. But I mean, like, yeah, like it's still just reeks to me of suspicious as hell. Like the entire situation and how it was handled.
Yeah, and I also, to the people, I mean, I haven't been accused of this at all. I've literally received no negative messages about what I've said about this case. But some people who are expressing some of the things or some of the concerns or skepticism that I have are calling this apologism. And I just want to point out that I know both men and women who have actually, like, as in they did not in any way express a desire to participate in this kind of activity. They were actually attacked by either other children or grown adults when they were children. They had no desire whatsoever to participate in this. There was no demonstration of a series of actions which led to them being in that situation that could have been misinterpreted as they would have wanted to engage in it. None of that. I know people who have like literally just been attacked by people, sexually assaulted. Most of them have not said anything. And the idea that you would tell them that a person who is basically on the verge of being old enough to consent to this, ostensibly consenting to, you know, as far as we've seen in the details have been released, there was no mention of coercion. If you would compare that to what some of them went through, that would not sit right with them. There is a fundamental difference between someone who is on the verge of being able to consent to something, but not being fully legally capable, according to the government, of being able to do that, and someone who was attacked, who did not sign up to a site that was clearly about exchanging sex for money. None of that. there's a clear difference between the two. This is not apologizing for anyone. I still think that Cody engaging in this website to begin with was taking an enormous risk. Like, this is on him too. Like, his behavior was, not commendable at all. I'm just saying that when you are talking about a case like this and you are basically rooting for the state to go after someone that you disapprove of, keep in mind that the people that are going after him, I mean, the amount of child abuse that happens at the hands of government employees is like staggering, but no one cares about that because those are not politically interesting people to the state. They are people in the state. And this commander very clearly said this was not about protecting children. She could have been an adult or a child, wouldn't have mattered. This was about solicitation. It is about them sticking their hands into voluntary relationships between people. And if we really wanted to have a discussion about whether she was capable of giving consent to this relationship, we should be investigating that. We should be someone should be evaluating her. What was her maturity level? What actually happened in the room? Was there coercion involved? No one cares about those questions, though, because the law puts everything in clear black and white terms. They say, you're not old enough for this. Oops. Okay. That means you're a child. That means the person that you may have cared about. I highly doubt that, because they only knew each other for in person for, it seems, a few hours. But it doesn't matter regardless. You could be in a long-term relationship. You could have had a one night stand. It doesn't matter to them. The law paints a clear black and white line that they do not care how mature you are as a person. Everyone is the same. They don't care how mature you are, how responsible you are. You are not an individual. You are under their control, and it is their decision what you're allowed to do, up until a certain point where you're given a few more privileges about what you're allowed to engage in. But the point is that it doesn't matter who she is. This would have happened regardless, because he is involved in a highly political case. They would have been prosecuting him even if this was a fully adult person. So her identity does not matter. And there is no evidence so far that, unlike some other people that I've seen, hello, Ethereum co-founder, who had any desire to engage with children. So,
Yeah.
not apologizing for anyone. Like, he made a stupid decision, but is that stupid decision worth being locked in a box for 10 years? That's the question that apparently lots of people have answers to.
This is like you touched on, I think the most upsetting part of the story is that, there's a lot of crap going on in places. And we saw a long time ago, not a long time ago, but, a while back now, that the Catholic Church, had a major problem with, and like they had, they've got a major problem with pedophilia within their org. And a lot of these, organizations that wield a lot of power, it's like, this is one of the darkest social webs to get involved in. It's really just like, this is what makes the dating scene so disgusting right now, hard to get through as to like, what are people's motives? I mean, it's like everybody feels a little so public that even when you go out and you meet some random person, there's still some questions lingering about, did catfish me to this point? And like, are they somebody that's trying to use me for something? And it's super upsetting, because I mean, you do see it even in the legislation for holding up the penalties. I mean, like, what does abuse a child under the age of 13? Usually you see them go in for 2 to 4 years in their own private wing of the prison, and then they get out and then they get released to some town in Florida where there's a lot of these guys, or, there's not really this 10 to 20 year relation based on some girl who almost was there at the age of consent. And, we decided that she's not of that age, which the age of consent question is like, that's the regulatory capture. And then you put into place these different websites to try and lure people in. It's a disgusting web that's within our current construct of society and the way that it's managed. So it's like it's like it's upsetting on a couple levels. I mean, first of all, yeah, moving forward with a pretty important battle when it comes to free speech and code and the way that that's all interpreted. And now, we're also kind of just, confronted again with the real ultimate power and capabilities of this organization that is running this construct. And it just makes you think, I mean, like makes me, yeah, it's like, it's a good thing I deleted my Tinder account. I'm glad I didn't think about, getting it back up, or next time I go to a date and I meet someone, I always wonder, like, okay, is this somebody that, like that background thought is there, and it's just destroying the whole fabric of society. It's so stupidly upsetting that, yeah, it's like it's so much to unpack, to where whenever you start to sound like what's labeled as a conspiracy theorist, and it's just it's stupid whenever we know that there's evidence that this has gone on before in power structures for a long time. It's still going on, and we turn a blind eye. There's very obvious, like, look through the black and white, see the gray, and know that, like, this is an orchestrated system to try and bring down people that they want brought down, and to encourage, I mean, basically the cesspool of people that are in charge. It's a really disgusting story when you start really digging into what this is.
Yeah, and the one other link that I included in my section for this story was a conversation that Naomi Brockwell had with a dancer, or a former dancer from Cirque du Soleil. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I thought it was a good conversation, even though, I mean, we've had Naomi on the show before once, and we thought that she enjoyed it, but apparently she didn't, because she was liking tweets that were calling us stupid afterwards. But regardless of that, I thought it was a good conversation because, first of all, it's two women talking about it who have both been 16 years old at some point in their life, and had to deal with, being in this limbo period where people think, you're not quite too young, but you're under the law not allowed to do certain things, and how we had to deal with that. So it was a good conversation. I would recommend checking it out.
Yeah, it's a lot for everybody to dig into, and I do suggest everybody, use their brains. Don't just read the headlines and start believing the narratives. Like, start understanding there's incentives and major court decisions and things like that at play. So think about all that. But let's get off of this heavy topic and get to something a little bit more. What's going on in Bitcoin this past week, and discuss some more. These growing trends that we've been discussing. And let me pull up my notes here. So yeah, like I fell down this stablecoin rabbit hole last night for a few hours, where thought this story was going to be relatively easy to suss. Started doing it. I covered that Gemini USD story. We'll get into this. So this story broke with the developer John Backus of Mountain View, California, tweeting, "Wow, quote, wow, what the F? The Pax stablecoin gives admin right access to law enforcement. Basically, the government can freeze and burn anyone's coins," with some screenshots attached where the code clearly shows the function set law, in which this function creates an Ethereum wallet with administrative control over the Pax token, particularly the freeze and wipe aspect of the wallets. Which, this made waves on social media, most likely because of just how blatant the code is when it comes to who's in control here. And yeah, we can, like I said, I started digging into this, and, there's like some bigger problems with this trend of ERC20 stable coins and, stable tokens. So, but this Paxos issue, there was a spokesperson for Paxos. It's called the Paxos standard, but it's the Pax token, whatever. A spokesperson for Paxos confirmed the backdoor were indeed built for law enforcement, but for reasons, stating, quote, "Pax has been approved based on stringent requirements to implement, monitor, and update controls to prevent Pax from being used in connection with money laundering, terrorist financing, and other illegal activities." Which Hard Fork covered this. story, and they linked the press release from the New York Department of Financial Services, and it mentioned GUSD along with PAX and what's expected from a regulated stablecoin in New York, which this is kind of where I started falling down, because I covered that Gemini USD story, and I started going back to their press release, the press releases that were surrounding that, and looking for, like, was there any similar people upset about this? And well, missed it right before last episode of people that said, like, started bringing this up. But so anyway, here's what the language from the New York Department of Financial Services say about what it requires for regulated stablecoins. Quote, properties that they want. Ensure that authorized stablecoins are fully exchanged for a US dollar with conditions to ensure monitoring and record keeping. Yeah, okay. Implement, monitor, and update effective risk-based controls to prevent and respond to any potential or actual wrongful use of stablecoin, including but not limited to its use as illegal activity, market manipulation, or other similar misconduct. Compliance with the Department of Financial Services transaction security regulations. Post terms and conditions in a prominent location on both Gemini and Paxos respective websites, and in any other form or manner required by Department of Financial Services that warns consumers that, one, any stablecoin and or the fiat currency available upon redemption of any stablecoin may be forfeited if the stablecoin has been or is being used for illegal activity. Any stablecoin may be subject to the forfeiture to or seized by a law enforcement agency in the legal order of or other legal process. Sorry. Any stablecoin or fiat currency available upon exchange or stablecoin that has been subject to freezing, forfeiture, or a seizure by a law enforcement agency and or subject to any similar limitation on its use may be wholly or permanently unrecoverable and unusable, and may, in appropriate circumstances, be destroyed. And then the last one's kind of funny. Maintain procedures for consumer protection and to promptly address and resolve customer complaints, which is kind of comical because it's like all this is in there for consumer protection, but people could buy lottery tickets. And I think the customer complaints might have something to do with the way that this custodial aspect is put together. So this whole situation, yeah, it had me wondering about the thing with the GUSD. And at the time when I reported on the stablecoin, I hadn't run across this press release and these stringent requirements for this regulatory approval that they were touting. And so I went back and went into the Gemini GUSD white paper, and under Section 6 contract separation, there is this quote: as a regulated issuer, we need a technical design and implementation that gives us ability to upgrade the Gemini dollar token so we can, 1, resolve vulnerabilities, 2, extend the system with new features, 3, improve the system and optimize its operational efficiency, and 4, pause block transfer in response to a security incident, catastrophic event, or if legally obligated or compelled to do so by a court of law or other government body. And also in Section 2, there was a quote on trust where they say desirable outcomes in a system that relies, at least in part, on trust requires oversight in the context of a stablecoin. We submit that the issuer must be licensed and subject to regulatory supervision. From this, transparency and examination become requirements of the system, ensuring its integrity and endangering I guess, I don't know this word. I'm sorry. Like, I think I misspelled this word. And instilling market confidence. I imagine what I meant to type. So, yeah, like I don't know, Gemini's language about the whole thing wasn't so set law enforcement role, which, you know, I guess that's why this whole story blew up with PAX. But, you know, there's a similar problem with Gemini USD, and CCN also, CoinCenter News also reported on this ability to freeze through Gemini just a little over a week ago without much blowback from the community, which like I just said, it's about the language. But I'm going to say, the trend of stablecoins is going to keep going, and we'll probably see some different implementations, some that are more crypto worthy, but also, you know, backdoors and crypto and these ERC20 tokens are trending. Like this report from CoinCenter News talked about how like EOS recently cleaned up some DApp wallets using a similar feature after they messed up an airdrop. And then back in July, Bancor froze and recovered 10 million from a $23 million hack with the similar freeze function. And yeah, that's where I think we are, is trying to find the need for these freeze function in the ecosystem, which right now with a story like this Pax one, it feels like it will be used to hurt people and not protect them. However, I could see the guys like Gemini doing this because they see it as, this is what our market at Gemini wants. And there was a quote there from a news article. Well, like I said, Gemini wants its token to exist alongside and within mainstream finance, not outside of it. And that's where, you know, the language from this Pax coin was pretty stupid. Like, I kind of understand. I mean, like, there is like the auditing and stuff like that that needs to be done. And you want to make sure that, you know, whenever there is a hack or something, there's an ability to try and do something about it. But I think there's ways around, you know, there's other things that are going on with, you know, Tether and, you know, maybe some other stable coins in development where that can be avoided without having to have in this programmed in backdoor. But for right now, I imagine wanting to trade on Gemini aren't too upset about this because I think that maybe they, you know, they like this. They think that this instills trust, where it's like, this is like one of those major differences between people who coin and understand what we're doing and people that don't, is just, yeah, some people don't understand that this is all about trust and getting your trust back. And they see that as a bigger problem. And so, yeah, there's customers for that. And I don't know how much they're going to be using Pax whenever they use language like they did. But yeah, I'm going to keep watching these stable coins because, yeah, part of this story missed me with the Gemini USD on their ability to do this. But I mean, ZRC20 tokens, they got all these sort of problems tied into them. I mean, if people want to find a one-to-one peg that's going to work, I mean, you know, right now I think I would still be sticking with Tether over one of these guys. But what do you guys think about this story?
I think that, I mean, even Tether can be frozen. Like, you know, well, I mean, I'm not sure about Omni, but Counterparty, another top layer token protocol that could do something just like Tether, allows you to issue assets with like expiry times or that you can take back. That's an inherent part of the thing. Like, my issue is giving direct access to law enforcement, bypassing the entire system of due process where you have to acquire evidence, you have to put a case together, you have to get a court order, you have to approach a company with all of this and go do this. It is just insane to me to completely bypass all of that and just give law enforcement the ability to freeze any and everything whenever they want. Like, that's absurd. And to think that that will not be abused in an illegal manner is just, it's insane to me. Like, it's batshit insane.
I mean, when I was looking at that, I was wondering, like, you know, yeah, who's the law enforcement though? I mean, like some self-regulatory, you know, some self-regulation there where, you know, Gemini, it's like, we're going to audit, you know, once a month with the third party to make sure that there's no inflation and that we're still solvent. And, you know, that that's some level of enforcement within this structure that they built. And I mean, like, that's where I mean, like, I'm thinking maybe they were just really stupid. And we're like thinking about it as like the FBI or the FinCEN guys are going to be watching these things all the time, where they were just really poor choice of words within the code. I don't know. That's where I was kind of giving them a little bit of leeway on that, because yeah, that's that would be really, like, just feels like that would be the destroyer of their token. I mean, maybe that's the way it's playing out. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you put it perfectly. Like, tokens like this are entirely based on trust of the issuer. Like, that is what maintains the market peg, aside from direct redemption from that party. And this is just a horrible, horrible way to try to establish that trust. Like, if there's something illegal going on, there is due process. Law enforcement can put together evidence. They can get a fucking court order. They can approach the company with that and go through proper channels to take some kind of legal action. But to just give them unilateral ability without going through that process to freeze people's money is asking for trouble and is asking for that trust to completely collapse.
Speaking of KYC tokens, when are we going to talk about the absurdity that is David Chaum's new ICO coming out? Is that in the show notes?
I was gonna put that on the next one. Just I haven't had time to really dig into it, and I want to do something a little less superficial with that.
Well, just spoiler alert to everyone: you have to be KYC'd, or to some extent, you have to provide your identity and stuff in order to even run a node for David Chaum's thing. So, have fun with that, guys.
Goodness, yeah. A little too much stress already in the lineup.
Yeah, I don't know. I think gonna slide along to the next one though, in the interest of time.
Everybody, take a deep breath.
No.
Shinobi.
No, everybody mute your fucking mics because I'm gonna start screaming.
I challenge
I will mute you. I will mute you.
I challenge you. You can say whatever you want as long as you don't swear.
I will mute you. I'm going to scream, and there's nothing you can do about it. So mute yourself, or I'll do it for you.
Well, that's just because you can't restrain yourself. You're not capable of giving criticism without swearing.
I'm gonna do it. All right. So I'm sure everybody has seen the announcement at Baltic Honeybadger about the B Foundation. And I just want to start off by saying, do not take the criticism I'm about to throw at this foundation as an attack on any of the people involved in starting it. I respect all of them. I think that their intentions are well placed in this. But nonetheless, I think this is a horribly stupid idea. And, you know, this mostly just has to do with all of the interplay of different dynamics that inevitably come along with something like this. When you start some kind of abstract, you know, group, you create a reputation that is beyond the individuals involved. You create a brand that people are going to look at with that reputation. And the initial state of that reputation is going to be a result of the individuals initially involved in this. But being an abstract group, people can come and go. Like you have no guarantee of a static membership. You have no guarantee that some people will always be involved and never leave. And this is a huge problem in every way, because that becomes a point of failure. That becomes something that's going to attract the flies, encourage attacks and attempts to subvert it. And ultimately, like, it's just a horrible fucking idea, because once that reputation builds up steam and momentum, it's not easy to destroy. It's not an individual that is permanently attached to their actions and their statements. It's amorphous. It is something attached to an abstract brand that is much harder to delegitimize or levy criticism against. And you can already kind of see this in the people who are critiquing this idea and those defending it. Like, it's just blind groupthink. And it's from the little I've engaged with and seen, people are not actually processing criticism. They're just blindly defending. These people are involved in something, so it is good. It can do nothing but create good results or come to a good end. And they're refusing to look at the downsides and the negatives. And secondly, I've seen Giacomo Zucco state that this will not attempt to speak for Bitcoin in any way. And I love Giacomo, but that is a pretty naive thing to say, in my opinion, especially when one of the slides showing their priorities for next year, the first one is to engage in huge public outreach to fight Bitcoin myths and FUD and perform education. So this just seems incredibly contradictory to me, because it's one of the first thing in their priorities is to start engaging in public outreach. And as far as speaking for something, you're not in control of how that's perceived. Like I speaking as an individual, my words are my words. I'm speaking for myself because I am an individual. But the moment that I start speaking under a different name, under a brand, I mean, even the show has had issues with this to some degree in the past, is it becomes attached to that brand instead of just me and the individual. And that's why, you know, the three of us here really go out of our way to differentiate our opinions and our statements as ours alone. And me especially, when I go off on rants or take very hardline opinions, I try to clarify that these are my statements and opinions and not those of Rick and Janine. And when you have something like a brand of the B Foundation, it's not that simple to just differentiate that. When the media starts looking at this organization and covering them, it's going to be the B Foundation. It is going to be all of these influential Bitcoin people. There's going to be a weight and a reach that individuals are not going to be able to measure up with as this picks up steam, that is going to be perceived as speaking for Bitcoin. And it's not just as simple as going, we're not speaking for Bitcoin, to prevent that perception, to prevent that dynamic from taking hold, because they are not in control of how they will be represented in the media. So just the idea of any kind of outreach is just a horribly stupid idea. And then the other aspect of this foundation, which I don't in itself have any real issue with, is to fund research. And I don't think you need a foundation for that. I mean, Trezor is involved in this. Lop is involved in this. I don't know if that crosses over to Casa Hodl, but, you know, somebody, the CEO of Blockstream is involved, the CEO of Lightning Labs. All of these are major companies that are perfectly capable of simply establishing grant programs if they want to fund research. There is no need to create this foundation, this brand that comes along with all of these complex social issues and creates a new attack surface and a liability as far as this ecosystem as a whole goes. And, you know, like I said when I first started, I have no intent to attack the individuals involved in this. But this idea is a bad idea. And it's not something that should be supported. It's not something that should just be blindly bandwagoned and presented as a good idea that can only have good outcome, which is what I see too many people doing in terms of reaction to this already, literally a day after it's announced, but less than looking at the clock. And this is completely in contradiction to what this space is supposedly about. Sovereign individuals speaking and acting for themselves. And I do not think that the people who started this have really thought about this, have really thought about the downsides and all of the issues that can come of this. And they really need to step back and think about those before they go forward. Because this is not just nothing but good outcomes or aspects. There are a lot of downsides to this and a lot of bad potential outcomes. And it should be put back on the drawing board before any real concrete steps are taken forward.
Well, so first, before Rick, you saying it, because I actually watched the presentation, and I don't know how many people watching the show watched the presentation about it, but basically Giacomo and Elena Satoshi gave a presentation at the Baltic Honeybadger conference today, where they announced that they were going to be, now technically it's actually still on the drawing board, because they said they've been talking about it for a year, but nothing actually exists except for a domain at this point. There isn't actually anything active. It's just people deciding to come together, and they wanted to announce that. So the information, if you go to the Block Digest Twitter account, I retweeted someone who shared pictures of the slides that they showed when they were talking about this. But essentially what this B Foundation, that's literally what's called, it's the B Foundation. They said that it was going to be registered in Liechtenstein, and it was going to, the reason they chose Liechtenstein, I'm just reading off of the chart from the slide, but they say that they chose Liechtenstein because it was one of the more Bitcoin supportive / tech savvy governments. So it was a friendly jurisdiction. And actually the foundation won't actually be a full foundation. It will be legally a mixed foundation, which means it has some charitable / non-profit functions, but also some commercial aspects. So it's a mixed thing. The governance with which they had a lot of caveats for was that there will be some kind of council like that is legally named as being a part of this foundation. There's going to be an executive team of directors and such, and a board. Obviously, I'm not as familiar with how those different functions work for a Liechtenstein mixed foundation, obviously, but you can see all of this on the slides. The donors, they explicitly said that they would not be accepting any money from any government. They did not want to take state money because, as Elena Satoshi said, it's stolen money. They're mostly thinking that they're going to get money from early Bitcoiners, Bitcoin businesses, probably from the businesses being run or participated in by the people who came up on stage to talk about this. And some are going to have to be acknowledged and some can be anonymous, just for purely legal reasons. Like people who donate a lot of money to it might have to be KYC because of the amount, because law. For the commercial aspect, they said they were going to engage in some investments, but they were going to be looking at long-term sustainability, no dividends for the foundation counselor advisors. So all of this is, I mean, literally the logo they created might not even be the logo they end up creating for the actual foundation, because apparently Elena drew it up like a few hours before the presentation. So this is all very much on the drawing board. Like nothing is set in stone here. This is just them sharing their ideas. What's another slide? So another slide is about their priorities for 2019, which I assume, so that basically means they're going to probably have an actual foundation set up by 2019. And their primary one is, as Shinobi said, debunking Bitcoin myths for mass media, creating a Bitcoin UX, integrating, making them more engaging and lightweight and fun. Elena's thing was that she wanted to create a comic called Satoshka, which is a Bitcoin hero, and use it for educational purposes. That seemed okay, art project. They also wanted to offer scholarships to get at least 500 new developers trained, and they wanted to donate $1 million or more towards research and development for privacy, fungibility, and Bitcoin's smart, I think they meant smart contract functionality. So those are a bunch of the goals. The thing that probably pissed a lot of people off was the part where they talked about, because one of the things they said was that a lot of this would, it would be transparent. They're planning to publish it on GitHub, and one of the things that is going to be open is also where your donation funds go. If you donate to the foundation in general, it could go to anything, but you can specifically specify that you want your donation to go towards a number of different areas like Bitcoin usability, Bitcoin R&D, or scholarships for training developers. The part that really riled people's feathers was that they included Bitcoin marketing and PR. And a number of people have already suggested after the presentation that was, including me, that was probably not a good thing to have. They should just replace that with Bitcoin education and not say marketing and public relations, because the implication of marketing is that you are selling a product, which means that the product that you're selling is something that you have some kind of responsibility for. That's not really the case here, because there aren't any. I mean, there are some developers. Jameson Lop is a developer. I don't know how many of the other people are developers, but most of them are not responsible for the quality of the code. So it wouldn't make sense for them to do marketing. It wouldn't make sense for Bitcoin core developers to do marketing either. public relations, also a loaded term. So anyway, that was probably the most contentious aspect of the presentation, was that they thought about doing marketing and PR. But like I said, this is all drawing board, and a number of people told them that's a bad idea, and they seem to be pretty receptive to that being a bad idea and probably putting that in the trash.
Also, sorry, real quick, Janine, I want to bring up something that came up in chat. Another huge issue I have with this is the dynamic of control over fund allocation for research. Individual companies can just pool their own money into a grant thing that they run and decide what they do with their own money. And it's not that complicated to just communicate with each other to make sure they're not doing redundant things like all funding the same kind of stuff, dealing more with things that are benefiting their projects or relevant to their projects. And it's not that insane of a complication. Whereas with something like this, and all of these companies pooling their own money into one pot under one group, you are concentrating the decision making into one area, deciding where these funds get allocated for research or development. And the more companies you have pile into this pool, the more funding for research and development you're putting under one single group to decide what does or doesn't merit development funding. And that is a horrible fucking idea as well, because you are pretty much concentrating the decision making of what merits funding in terms of development into one centralized group. And the more companies you get involved, the more skewed that gets.
So my response to that would be the fact that a lot of these Bitcoin companies are already coordinating with each other on some level, and the fact that they're creating a foundation doesn't necessarily change the concentration of that coordination. It just makes it more explicit and transparent that they're going to be doing that, and this is where the money is going and being distributed from. I like the companies that are working on the Lightning stuff, for example. They have a Bolt specification that is a coordinated effort between them. They don't have a legal foundation. I wouldn't necessarily even be opposed to them doing that, because if you're already coordinating, like, what does an added legal structure do to that? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how much. I don't know how that, affects the coordination outside of making it more explicit and having.
It's not just the coordination. It's having a legally established board, one group outside of those companies themselves to decide where money does and doesn't go, instead of each individual company deciding where their money goes.
Well, according to how they claim to want to set this up, they're already saying that when you donate to it, it's not them mostly deciding. You can decide to just give it blankly to the foundation and say do what you want with it, but they also say they're going to give the option that you can donate to specific areas. Like, if you only want your money to go towards scholarships, it will go towards scholarships. If you want it to go towards educational resources or debunking FUD, it will go towards that. So as long as they hold on to that, I don't see any problem with delegating that decision-making process, because if you wanted to donate to these developers on your own, you can still do that. They're just giving you the option of, we'll handle the coordination with these developers that the money will go to, and make sure they actually, get trained.
I do, because this is part of what I mean by them not thinking this through. Companies have the option to just wash their hands of it and just throw money into something for PR or return purposes. They're just going to do that. And even if you have it isolated in small groups or small sections of research, it's still one group deciding what does or doesn't merit funding. Like, this is just a horrible idea. But there are already enough.
They're already deciding who should get funding or not. Like, if you want to do research on Bitcoin and you want to get paid for it, you either have to appeal to someone who has a lot of Bitcoin who will pay you independently, or you go to one of these companies and say, will you pay for this research? And they decide whether they give you money.
Each individual company decides.
Can we take a step back just
Fund
a second?
like let's both outsourcing that decision making to a single group. And the more money it attracts, the less options people will have, because companies will stop doing independent analysis and funding of things. They'll just go here, because that's where all the money is concentrated.
Well, the part of the aspect of Bitcoin is that you take personal responsibility for your finances. And so if you find out that they're not going to be putting money in a place that you would want, the solution is that you just don't give them your money and you give it to wherever you directly want to give money. Like, they're just giving another option. And like, I get why people are frustrated. Like, I hate the Bitcoin Foundation for a number of reasons. Like, if I don't know how many of our viewers have been around long enough to even know about the Bitcoin Foundation, but if you go to bitcoinfoundation.org, that is the website for the current supposed Bitcoin Foundation. If you go to the About section, you can get a list of directors. And the person who is the executive director of the Bitcoin Foundation is some dude named Lou Klassen. I have never heard of this guy. I don't know who the fuck he is, but he's apparently the executive director of the Bitcoin Foundation, which pretends to represent Bitcoin, which is ludicrous. Like, none of these people on this director list are people who I feel in any way speak for me, and most of them are actually people that actively speak against things that I care about. So, if this just brings more competition to the Bitcoin Foundation, that's part of the reason why I'm not so ticked off, because if they get some competition doing whatever they think they're doing, with Giacomo and Elena and all these other people, if their only function is to just be a competing voice, however deficient it may be, against this other Bitcoin Foundation, that seems like one benefit to me of this. And I'm still skeptical. I don't know whether this is going to work because it literally just got announced. I've only had a few hours to think about it, but I'm not at the point where I'm angry, because the whole point before Giacomo even talked about the B Foundation was to point out that a lot of the foundations in the past, especially the Bitcoin Foundation, they've absolutely failed. And he was trying to figure out why it had failed. He listed a number of reasons. I don't know if he was thorough enough with that, but they're acknowledging that this is a very risky area, and this kind of thing is going to happen regardless. And as long as they make it clear from the beginning that they will not try to speak for Bitcoin in the horrible way that the Bitcoin Foundation has tried to speak for Bitcoin,
But
I'm just like, I don't have any reason to get angry at this point. I'm skeptical, but I'm not angry.
that's
Like,
my
these are-
problem. Is they have no control whatsoever over whether they're perceived as doing that or not. And none of my problems with this have to do with the name or the Bitcoin Foundation. It's the incentives for any organization like this. I have talked with many people in this space over the last year or two about a number of different organizations like this, and my answer has always been the same. My criticisms have always been the same. This is about the incentives of an organization like this. I don't care what the name is. This is about how it will evolve and function in the long term. And it will turn into a bureaucracy. That's what happens with these types of things. That's where the incentives naturally take it.
I'm going to take a deep breath and step back from this whole thing, because it just happened 6 hours ago. Like you're saying, I mean, it was just now. And, I understand, you're upset about this incentive thing, and I can understand somebody saying they're going to speak for Bitcoin marketing and PR and what that's going to do as far as lumping everybody in groups. Because, I mean, like you're saying, like we're saying, we've seen it in the past with the Bitcoin Foundation, and, just even it's the way that core was labeled, and the way that people get, oh well, you're just a person who thinks like core, and it's just like these labels aren't really that great. And but the guys doing it, I like those guys. They're what I would call like friends of mine, and everything, as far as like we both kind of see the same bigger picture of things. And they're coming from this area, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, and this part of the world where they say it's because of technical abilities and stuff, which I'm not really sure that. I haven't really been over there, but I know that financially, and they're real liberal. And recently there was like 30% of the Swedish population that wanted to implement a system like Bitcoin. And I'm trying to think about it from the perspective of like, let's say we're on the cusp of real Bitcoinization for an area of the world. And like, do you just allow that system to voluntarily be adopted, which the way we like, or do you try to usher it in a direction where you think that the development's going to be useful for the area and that people aren't, and you can try and expedite the process to where there's not so many scams going on? And yeah, it's like, to me, it's like the name is one of the biggest problems. I mean, it's like, you're like somebody was saying, it's like it brings up the aspect of the B. It's like the Bitcoin B was never really that big of a deal until B Cash. And now it's like something else where it's the B, and then you add foundation into it. And it, yeah, the namesake thing to me is like one of the bigger problems. But you know, yeah, it's the system where it's like we're supposed to be voluntarily adopting people that come into the system at their own time and pace and understanding, where this might be something to sort of expedite the process to one region, instead of like the way we're thinking about it as like this is going to be some global or overreaching organization that's going to, you know, impose its will as to what is Bitcoin. You know, I think it's too quick to jump the gun on that. But I understand your aggravation, and I'm glad, I appreciate it, you know, because it's like, if everybody took the stance I took, then, you know, something like that could easily sort of snowball into that sort of problem. I appreciate the pushback. I think it is something that the guys who are running all this stuff should, you know, sit back and put some more questions to it and ask, like, if this is the best idea, this is the best route. It's just, I think, you know, we've got a bunch of guys over there at the Hodl conference and in an area of the world that's really moving forward with Bitcoin on a good level. It's just, you know, maybe it's not, you know, it's probably pretty tempting to try and like just usher it quickly. That's going to be a prime example of what kind of system we want. So, you know, I mean, like the SRO in Japan that put all those exchanges together to come up with best practices seems to be, you know, like a good way to kind of put together an organization without throwing a label on it. And actually, yeah, like kind of everybody's still an individual in this group. And so I think it's all just to do with labels. And, you know, we still need to perspective from the group of people that are putting this together before I go all out against them. I just think that, yeah, there's some, you know, I would rethink the name, and then, yeah, like the, you know, I would have to kind of understand what exactly all they're seeing before I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I don't know if they should change the name. I might actually take issue with them using the Bitcoin logo. That is a problem. They don't necessarily have to do that, but
I didn't even see that.
like I said, Elena just kind of drew it up in the few hours before the presentation, so it's not even an official logo. So they might change it. But to the point of, you know, this creating bureaucracy, I mean, one of the things, if people don't know this about Blockstream was basically created as not as a nonprofit, but as a commercial company. But the reason they created it was to make it easier to fund developers. There's going to be a certain level of bureaucracy in all of this when people want to do this kind of thing and get paid on a very complex, coordinated level. So there's essentially at the moment not a lot of difference, except for the legal structure and all of that, between what Blockstream is doing right now and what this B Foundation claims to do, except for the name and the things with doing marketing and PR for Bitcoin. That's a problem. But essentially, they're like, Blockstream did the same thing. They basically tried to figure out how to deal with bureaucracy, and there's always going to be some of it when you have to comply with all of these regulations from the state. So I would just say, like, be vigilant and ask questions, and as long as they're willing to answer questions and willing to listen to people who have criticisms and who have fears, then just engage with them on a constructive level until it gets to the point where you think there might be something malicious going on. But I don't see any of that happening. And I don't know if even the incentives involved will lead to something malicious happening at this point. Don't know. We'll have to see.
All right, though. I think we've beat this topic to death. So sliding along. Another Tether research paper this one by Wang Chunwei from Queensland University in Australia, a business school. So actually a known academic doing actual statistical research and not deranged conspiracy theory nonsense. And link is in the show notes for anybody who actually wants to pick through. Although, just in case you get confused, there are just insert comments for the charts and figures. You can find them all at the end of the paper. But this pretty much does a very simplistic analysis of the markets. And no, it has nothing to do with Tether being audited or whether money is being printed out of thin air. This is concerning itself mostly with the trading volume and dynamics and looking at how big of an impact Tether trading and Tether volume actually has on Bitcoin as a whole. And so what this has done is it's dumped the entire history volume from, I believe, 2016 to 2018 for Bitcoin and Tether, as well as gotten the history of all Tether issuances. And they've broken things down into a number of different statistical analyses. So firstly, they look at just the price performance and history of Bitcoin itself with absolutely no input from the Tether issuance or Tether volume trading data. And then they construct a second model looking at correlations between the issuance of Tether and Tether volumes. And so the chief thing regarding Tether volumes that they find is during periods of pullbacks or increases, they do see, or I'm sorry, pullbacks or the issuance of new Tether, they do see a spike in Bitcoin trading volume. But these spikes usually only last a few days and very quickly revert back to the mean. And one thing that they find in this analysis that a lot of other analysis on Tether kind of gloss over or ignore is that in big downturns, so days following a negative price movement of Bitcoin, there's actually a huge increase in volume of people moving out of Bitcoin into Tether. So it is not simply something being printed out of thin air and being used to pump Bitcoin. There is also reverse flows in the other direction when people would find it advantageous trading the markets to move into something pegged to the dollar as opposed to keep themselves exposed to Bitcoin volatility. And the most significant finding in this study is when you actually look at the prediction of future Bitcoin performance, including the Tether data and discluding the Tether data. And so when you look at both of these side to side, data including Tether trading volumes and the issuance of Tether has pretty much absolutely no difference in being able to accurately predict the gain performance of Bitcoin compared to just the Bitcoin price history itself. And looking at when a lot of this FUD and nonsense started picking up, it's pretty much when Bitcoin's market capitalization started increasing and when the accuracy of price signals and being able to predict future gains became more accurate as the market became better capitalized, more liquid. This is what happens. The more liquidity, the more market cap there is in an asset, the more accurate the predictions based on past performance for future performance are going to be. And so just purely statistically, all of the nonsense about printing Tether out of thin air aside, you can see that there is almost no difference whatsoever in the accuracy of future predictions, including Tether data or not looking at the Tether data and simply at the price performance of Bitcoin itself in the past. And when you really break all this down and look at it, the influence on the market that Tether has is almost completely insignificant. Like it's completely absurd to point at Tether, which is a mere $2 billion that has been very stagnant in its issuance and very in line with normal trading patterns, simply looking at the Bitcoin price history itself and what you would expect to be the trading activity following those analysis, to say that this has a disproportionate effect on the price of Bitcoin. So an actual academic study statistically here is pretty much calling complete bullshit on the Tether is propping up Bitcoin narrative. Cricket.
I'm sorry, man. I'm like thinking about two other things at the same time. But yeah, you know, I don't, the whole Tether stable coins, this whole issue. I don't know. We've got a lot of sussing out to do, but for the most part, every time something comes up with Tether, I understand it as this is the best option we have right now. So I just, I don't really hold too much of that stuff against Tether when we have these other guys that are, actively, colluding with governments and installing backdoors to properly let law enforcement run the reins.
Mm-hmm. So again, we can say Bitfinex, shut the fuck up, okay? Just shut up. Moving along, just a really quick update from California. They have followed the example of South Carolina and banned the contribution to political campaigns with cryptocurrencies. And apparently have spent quite a while actually debating this matter, and have kind of hedged their bets a little bit in saying that this debate will continue, and potentially based on further decisions or analysis might change in the future. But for right now, you cannot contribute to a political campaign with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in California. And most of the reasoning was in the complications in dealing with the source of funds. So a lot of the same rationale that happened in South Carolina. But little quick update, not much substance. Guys want to throw some comments around or just move along?
Man, yeah, let's just move along because it's hard to figure out why this or that for right now on these things.
Alrighty then. PayPal has banned Alex Jones for promotion of hate or discriminatory intolerance. So on September 21st, they were given 10 days to find a new payment processor for Infowars.com, after which PayPal services will not function for them. And the interesting thing I want to point out here is their reasoning was promoting hate or discriminatory intolerance, yet they refused to cite a single specific instance of anything when Infowars questioned them for examples. So looking at how this will actually affect Infowars, about 60% of their digital shop purchases are completed with PayPal. And I'm sure, as everybody knows, they have a huge line of survival tools, of dietary supplements, of all. And this is really the bulk of their revenue and their income as a business. And, I'm sure it's not really too shocking to a lot of people, but this is a lot different than a publishing platform kicking you off and refusing to distribute your funds. This is effectively financial censorship. This is not just something that is saying, no, we will not spread your content for you. You do that yourself on your own platform. This is effectively going, fuck you. We're going to impede your ability to actually generate revenue and make an income. And he already has a large amount of supporters pretty much telling Infowars to start looking at Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to facilitate the difference in payments. But realistically speaking, aside from viewers who are already cryptocurrency users, I'm sure that Infowar viewers would be more likely to look into using cryptocurrencies than a lot of other platforms' customers in order to continue patronizing the business. But I still don't think that just switching over to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies are really going to fill in the gap of 60% of your customer base in payments. And like this is quite a different thing ethically in my mind than a content distribution platform. I mean, you need money. If you can't make money or spend money, you effectively cannot survive in society. It's not just you're not able to reach people with a verbal message or intellectual content. You are actually unable to live. You cannot put a roof over your head. You cannot put food in your stomach. You cannot pay bills for necessary things to actually survive. And this is crossing over into a whole different territory than just we're not going to put your videos on our website. And I'd like to point out also that this is not something that is specifically isolated to Alex Jones or PayPal. In the past few weeks, what's the name? BitChute. It's a decentralized YouTube alternative that distributes video content through BitTorrent. Had their payment processor out of nowhere shut down their services and refused to process payments for them. Gab.ai has had a number of run-ins with things like this. And this is getting absurd to the point of scary. Like this is going beyond just the distribution of information. This is actively attempting to fuck up people's financial livelihood without any serious argument whatsoever for actual harm being committed in whatever exchanges are generating this revenue. Like this is getting fucking absurd, and this is just the perfect illustration of exactly why Bitcoin is a necessary thing in society.
Yeah, and I understand some people are like, "Oh man, Alex Jones again." It's like, but you know, like I think it is important that we cover this as it's unfolding because it is, you know, really important that in America we do have that right to free speech, and that you know, you're not going to be just shut down just for pushing an idea. Like I understand that these new platforms kind of give people a bigger voice, and that scares people, but you know, they're supposed to be like these individual liberties, you know, rights afforded, or you know, these things just get stripped away. And you know, I know that we had a little bit of discussion in the past with this whole censorship on multiple levels now, just because this is a growing trend. I think you know, since we've seen this positive, or I don't know if it's positive or negative, net neutrality decision that's helping corporations do this sort of stuff, along with some of the propaganda laws that have been passed recently. It's just it's real disturbing. I mean, like I actually was at this is kind of not really that off topic, but it just like said it. I mean, like I was at a thrift shop and I saw an American history textbook from 1963 that I picked up with a JFK forward in it, and I just started reading it, and I was just like immediately like, man, I don't know how we drifted so far from where we were trying to go, but you know, where we're at right now, it's like you know, this is like the archive of you know, a lot of people that are pushing down what's supposed to be American values. And I mean, you know, maybe once Bitcoin takes over and some of these new systems that aren't so centrally controlled, you know, start losing their power and everything, we can see some sort of blowback and accountability for some of these people that are doing this. You know, I mean, you know, some of these social networks and the sort of payment processors, you know, these guys, I think, you know, as Americans, we should, like, I feel like this because, you know, maybe I'm a veteran and, you know, all that sort of stuff that comes with it. I think that we should try and, as much as we might not agree with you know, the person who's speaking, or maybe we do or don't, and you know, we should still stand up for you know, censorship and fight against that, because you know, there's not really many places where you can kind of just speak your mind and try and build a crowd around an idea and try and keep it moving forward. You know, it's kind of unique here, and it's a sad thing to see it kind of get degraded over time. And so yeah, I think it's important to catalog all this stuff and not just sort of, you know, let it happen and be like, oh, well, you know, yeah, I think we should, you know, yeah, I think we should pay attention to it because it's, Yeah, I mean that's the front line of the fight, man. I mean, like I don't know. Nowadays, it's like you just say the name Infowars or Alex Jones. I know you're getting popped up in an algorithm, and yeah, it's scary. It's the front line, so covering it.
I mean, like I've said before, don't like Alex Jones, think he's generally an idiot. But on the topic of using payment processors who can censor you for your speech, I mean, I do use some fiat payment processors, but I use them as little as possible. And every time I use them, I have the understanding that whatever money passes through it may not end up in my pocket. They may take it, they may freeze it, they may stop me from using the payment processor at all. So I minimized my use of them as much as possible. And I'm not even a super wealthy or connected individual or popular individual who would obviously have I mean, obviously it's difficult, but such people would have a much easier time finding different avenues of supporting themselves in some way. And I don't even have that. So if I can deal with that risk on a daily basis, then I'm sure those people can.
You are not a multi-million-dollar business that has 60% of its volume handled through that platform, though. And it still doesn't make it any less ethically fucked up.
I didn't say it was not ethically fucked up. I'm just saying that people find ways. Nature, like money, finds a way.
It'll
And
definitely. I think
building
it'll find a way.
it. And the thing is, we should have realized this years ago when they shut down WikiLeaks. Like that was the canary in the coal mine. And so anyone after that point who was using these fiat gateway or fiat processing services, they should have known the entire time that that could go away at any second. And if they were not prepared for that, that is on them, because I have been prepared for years. A lot of people have been prepared for years.
I think that had a lot to do with just like, yeah, it's, I don't know. I think people assume if you're in America and you're an American citizen, you kind of have some rights that maybe, yeah, Julian Assange is running all over the world, as an Australian citizen, I think that these guys thought they had different rights afforded to them. And this is where, yeah, I mean, like he'll find his way around. There's other options, but it's just like important because, yeah, we've seen censorship a lot. Just like some of the first times in America, we've seen corporations of conglomerates of people here in the United States actively self-police and censor to the point that it is stifling American freedom.
But I think we are going to be unable to avoid running a little over, but let's try to keep that to a minimum and jump to the next one. So there was recently a letter on the 21st sent to the SEC from Bryan Bishop, a Bitcoin core developer, former Morgan Stanley managing director Caitlin Long, founder of Ernst & Young, Gavin Fury, and then Christopher Allen, kind of as a warning letter to the SEC against how legacy institutions might adopt Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in a number of specific ways. And most of this was kind of, in a way, centered around Backed being launched by the Intercontinental Exchange, and kind of warning about specifically how the product was structured in terms of the custody aspect of things. And really the core of this warning was in kind of pooling all of the users' cryptocurrency funds into a single address or account where you can't really simply audit things, and enabling for rehypothecation, assets kind of being lent out and thrown on the balance sheet of multiple supposed holders of this, and how this could negatively influence the technology in the market by effectively adding liquidity into the market for assets that don't actually exist and exist only in name on paper. And specifically, Bryan is advising that they reach out to some of the developers and some of the cryptography experts in this space to kind of work with them to better understand how this technology functions and how regulation could be applied in a way to actually help this ecosystem thrive by recognizing how it's structured technologically instead of just taking the same old legacy regulations and lopping them on top of these products. And the one specific example that him and Caitlin were warning about was the commingling of funds into a single address or account, and how something like Bitcoin allows an institution like ICE to natively segregate things into trackable, auditable accounts for each individual customer, so that there is a much more transparent view into where exactly funds are allocated and how many claims are outstanding. And as most of you probably know, with my rants pretty much telling the SEC to go fuck themselves, I'm not very happy with how they've been acting in this space. But depending on how they react to this letter and how open they are to actually attempting to understand these things and move in a more intelligent direction, I think that this could possibly create some net benefits in terms of not having them force companies to do things that are stupid and detrimental to Bitcoin to comply with regulations as they are now, and looking at how things could be restructured in a way that actually prevents the kind of systemic threats like rehypothecation to the Bitcoin market, and encourages using storage in a way and the technology overall in a way that creates a robust defense against these kind of things. And, I think hopefully things will go that way instead of the SEC just doing what they seem to have been doing for the past few years and ignoring all input and completely twisting and distorting their rules to play gatekeeper.
Oh man, I don't want to go too deep. It's like you're saying, we got some stories to cover. I could definitely make some comparisons that draws into something.
Cricket, no shit talking the SEC from Janine. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much this has to do with the story of the B Foundation or anything. I'm just thinking about, organizations coming together to try and do things right and everything. I don't want to link that and try and spill those beans again.
Alrighty then, moving along. The SEC has delayed its decision on the VanEck ETF proposal. And lo and behold, this happens right after the letter we just discussed was sent to the SEC. And it's not really that shocking at all. I mean, this is pretty much standard operating procedure at this point. Keep delaying the proposal as long as you can. Find some distorted interpretation of a rule and go no. But they're pretty much asking for more input from the public. And it's kind of hilarious that they're doing so, because so far with over 1,400 comments, 99% of them have been in favor of launching this ETF. And I will say that this is one of the only proposals out there right now that, aside from the issues of the SEC being able to play gatekeeper and decide who can and can't launch this note or launch an ETF, and the concentration of funds issue that brings about, I don't have any problems with this, because this is an entirely spot-based ETF. This would involve actual transfer of Bitcoins and complete backing by Bitcoins, as well as being redeemable. I think this is really the only kind of intelligent, sustainable way to structure an ETF that's not going to wind up being used to completely distort the functioning of the marketplace as a whole. But I do believe, based on this, from the 21st, there's 21 days in order to throw in more comments, and anybody trying to rebut this ETF has 35 days to throw in more comments. But yeah, I guess let's wait and see how this goes. I'm betting at this point that this is going to be stretched out all the way till February or March of next year. And yep, looking forward to a few months of excuses and reasons to keep delaying it.
Oh yeah, man, that's like the only ETF news you hear. It's like it's been delayed, it's been pushed, like we're rethinking it. It's just like yeah, like we're saying, I think we'll see products come along, and then eventually, like, are people still working on those things?
Mm-hmm. All right, I guess final and last note, just to tack on the end here. Fidelity Investments has recently made a few comments about intending to roll out some Bitcoin or crypto products by the end of the year. And there's really not too many concrete details, aside from they've had a number of different products or use cases for Bitcoin, Ethereum, or potentially just raw blockchain technology, but most have been scrapped or put on the shelf, according to the CEO. So really, this just seems to kind of be following the same playbook that groups like NASDAQ or their owners, ICE, have for the last year or two. And it's just a lot of spitballing in terms of what could be done behind the scenes, and really just looking and following along with market structure and demand for different things, as well as the overall regulatory environment, before actually really committing themselves to structuring or launching anything. But given the timeline for this, I wouldn't be too surprised if they're waiting to see what the CFTC's reaction to Backed is, and then potentially trying to offer a similar product if the approval is given for Backed to launch. Cricket.
Fidelity thing, yeah, I was thinking about how I explained that, like, before, like last year, like I used to have a boss that was all like, Bitcoin is so complicated, this whole crypto, and I told him, I was like, yeah, Fidelity just started offering something. Oh, now I've known that they've been offering something. I really need to read this just to understand like what the difference is between that and now.
All righty, I can take a hint, Janine. Final thoughts. Here we go.
Yeah, so I thought this, I wanted to share it because I thought it was hilarious. As you've probably seen if you're on Twitter, there's a problem with scam accounts, especially the Ethereum giveaway ones. And Andreas made a thread, I think a few days ago, about how, various platforms have been having the same problem besides Twitter, where he's getting all of these repeat identities and they're not willing to do anything about getting rid of them. And if you can scroll up a bit, Vinny Lingham actually suggested that he use something from Civic, which claims to prevent anyone unauthorized from using your name. Would you like an invite? And then Andreas just responds with this screenshot of looking up Vinny Lingham's name on Twitter, and there's like a bunch of fake accounts, and it's just like it's just like you're recommending a product that doesn't even work for you, Vinny. So, yeah, I just thought it was funny.
Wrecked.
Yeah, that is hysterical, man. All right. I've got a final thought, and let's see. We should be having a special edition coming up soon again with some interesting Lightning Network projects and are interesting within the guys that are working behind it, and get a little bit more story on that. It should be interesting. Keep your eyes peeled. And just quick rundown again. Remember, get off dating apps. Be cautious about regulated stablecoins, and rethink the B Foundation. That's it.
Mm-hmm. I guess my final thought is the B Foundation. Like, people who are in favor of this right now, don't look at criticism of the foundation as an attack on the people who started it, and actually think this through. Like, actually think through the issues with incentives of an organization like this I brought up. And don't make this you're either attacking the individuals who started it or you're supporting the individuals who started it. Like, don't just sit here and blindly follow something because of the people involved. This space is about thinking things through yourself, about actually verifying things, and not just becoming a complete and utter victim of groupthink. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of shit fits on Twitter over this. I'm going to be one of the people making them, but it is in the sense of trying to get people to actually think about this. Something is not automatically good because good people are involved in it. This isn't about the individuals, this is about the incentives of the organization itself. So please actually sit and think this through. And then on a last note, join me if you haven't had a chance to watch live and catching up with all the Honeybadger presentations, because I'm assuming there is a lot of good shit in there. So I guess until normal episode Wednesday or special edition Tuesday, we will see you guys later.
Watch out, or Mr. Huddle will throw vegetables at you.
Everyone.